Oh, sorry. I was able to record and I know Kelly wasn't able to jump in, so I'm recording. We are also giving away a book at the end of the webinar, so stay on. And if you're in the US, I'll send you a physical book, and otherwise you'll get a digital copy if you're international and you win. Tan. Today, we're going to integrate this objective, both language and content. We are going to be structuring academic output. We're at the end of the school year in most parts of the world, and our students are there. They're speaking and writing. How do we use these last weeks, days of the year to help our experienced multilinguals really structure their academic output? And we're going to do that by planning for that language development. And that means we're going to structure it, explicitly support it. Academic output for the experienced multilinguals. When we talk about them, that's the title of the book. This is a specific subgroup that fits under a bigger umbrella, and you'll see that on this slide, is that this group of multilingual learners falls under all multilingual learners, but they are those students who have been learning in English in an English medium environment for 5 or more years and have been classified as English learners. So these are what we consider in some places in the world long-term Ls. Tan and I are advocating for a more assets-based term, experienced multilinguals. So today, in our instructional framework for experienced multilinguals, where we always backwards plan from the summative assessment into each individual lesson that helps students get to that summative. That's that orchard analogy where you think first, what am I growing? Apples, right? Or oranges. Each orange tree or apple tree in that orchard helps the students get to the success. And then finally, we're going to give them lots of comprehensible input and structure that academic output. That's what we're focused on here today.
So before we get to there, we think about how do we structure the output? Well, what's the output first of all? Let me give you an example of the output for beginners. Let's just say they're doing an experiment. They have to move a lamp around, that like change the distance, and then they can count the bubbles produced by the pondweed. Some students who are beginners might say much bubble. We're satisfied with that. However, experienced multilinguals will say this. They're grammatically incorrect. There'd be like more bubbles when like the light be closer, right? And this is what it sounds like. And we're like, yes, it's the social language that students use, but we're trying to get them to use more academic language like this. When the light intensity increased, the rate of photosynthesis increased, as evident by a greater production of bubbles. Look at how complex that is. And look how connected to content is. That's what we're looking out for our students who are experienced multilinguals moving to academic language.
So what exactly do we mean with academic language? I see in here we have experts. I know many of you. Please drop in the chat. What does academic language mean? And you just a word to fill in the blank, or a two, or a phrase. You don't have to write the whole phrase. Academic language is, or it means, or it includes. If you could go ahead and drop those into the chat, that would be great. And Kelly, if you are in the room, just say hi. Yay, we have words that are learned in the classroom grade level, tier 2 and tier 3, absolutely a part of it. And with a larger concept of language used in learning or complex language, it includes, Robin, you're exactly right, connectors as well as that vocabulary that's coming out. Formal language, Maria calls it. It's more specific to content or discipline specific. Absolutely. Thank you. It does include register, Anna, or Anastasia. Great. It's that school language, as Wanda says, grade level includes content specific language. All of this is absolutely correct. And if you look across the board, we have lots of terms around vocabulary, whether that's tier 2, tier 3, as Christy and others have said. Yes, yes, yes. All of that is part of academic language. But Tan, if you move it forward, we'll see that academic language is more than just vocabulary words. And many of you have hinted at that for sure. So what are the other things that are part of academic language. And many of you in here have already talked about those transition phrases, register, as Anne says, but many of you are just saying technical words. Is there anything else that you can think of that are included? Yay, and structure. That's where we're going today. So we can go ahead and move on, Tan. There are four key parts of academic language. This architectural metaphor came through from Suzanne Dutroux and Moran in 2002. So we are well over 20 plus years of knowing this, that the vocabulary is the bricks. And that's why it was the first thing that everyone talked about. It's those words like photosynthesis and culture, but also the tier 2 words like factor and feature and contribute. So absolutely what came up in the chat. Thank you, Anne. Sentence structure is a huge piece of it. So the vocabulary, those bricks have to be fit together into a structure, into some kind of sentences. And that structure includes things like appositives, like Mari, my only child, actually is teaching in Switzerland this year. So that a positive in there, my only child, as a structure that we can explicitly teach that moves students forward. We don't speak in appositives very often, but you do have appositives that are in academic language that often throw students off. And that's just one example. Another piece of academic language, of course, is the organization. And that didn't necessarily come up in the chat unless I missed it. This is our discourse level. Like, how does the whole paper fit together? That a narrative looks different than an argument, that looks different than an informative text. This is where our headings and our paragraphing and transition phrases come in. When we say things like at first and later, which somebody did mention about transitions, this is also the whole structure of a paper or a report. Excellent. And the final piece did come up around register. Context is that sociocultural context includes register, includes the purpose for the text, includes the audience, the text type, the purpose. It's the report, the essay, the poem, all of that fits into context, whether it's formal or informal, who the audience is. Anyway, that's all features of academic language. So in our session today, we're going to focus on one lesson. Tan and I backwards plan for one lesson from the exit ticket. Even if you don't actually get to the exit ticket, planning from the exit ticket helps us look for all of those language features. So we ask ourselves, what should students know and be able to do by the end of one lesson? Remembering that this is just one step or one tree in the big orchard. So everything we do in that one lesson should be leading students towards success on the summative assessment. That's where we're going to go now. So this is an example of an exit ticket that came out of work that I've done with different schools, a lot of late elementary, early middle school, do something about structural and behavioral adaptations of animals. And so in this particular lesson, the exit ticket for one lesson in their whole unit about structural and behavioral adaptations was to describe a structural adaptation of a hummingbird. So they were practicing along the way in this unit.
So before we get to there, let's look at exit tickets for tomorrow or today's class. So here are some ideas. Like we just gave you ours example of like describe, then the content. Describe is the thinking verb. Structural adaptation of hummingbirds is the content. So I would like for you to think about your content tomorrow or today and just use one of these thinking verbs and then add your content. Describe, recount, compare. Describe the causes of. Describe what happens when, what was happening when. Hypothesize blank. Summarize plus the content. Persuade, recommend.
Now, I know we have in here, Tan, a lot of leaders as well. I recognize many of them, like Maria's at the state level in Alabama. You can just think about one that you've had in your past or a teacher that you're working with. So you can just make up one if it's not your actual class. And if you would drop that in the chat, we'll have some things to work with that you are actually working on.
And as you do that, we will use this for the rest of the session. This your whatever your exit ticket is. Sweet. I'm just waiting for responses. Okay. As they come through, please put them in. Here you go.
So Ashley's got to describe what a thesis statement is and how it's used in an essay. Oh, that's going to be a good one to play with, Tan. She's got a 2-part exit ticket.
Perfect. And both are described?
We also have, oh, you stole it from your high school English teacher. Thanks, Ashley. We have a summarize the story using sequencing words. Thank you, Megan. We have a recommend 2 ways to support multilingual learners in your context. Erica's got summarize the hero's journey in Percy Jackson. I'm guessing 6th grade on that one. Excellent. This is recount 3 main events in World War I. We've got a social studies context there.
Perfect.
And oh, we've got measure the area of a perimeter, and the shape was just in a math class. That's great. Recount how candy has changed from the beginning to the end of chapter 3. Lovely. We have a compare the TH and SH sounds. This is an elementary teacher. We've got compare fractions and decimals, compare deciduous and evergreen trees. We have things to work on. This is great.
We do. And notice how Kira Williams shared the word measure. And it doesn't matter if it doesn't show up in this list. It's just the concept of starting with the thinking verb. And the thinking verb is not learn or understand. It's actually something students can do. When they measure, we can see if they can measure and if they can read the measurement. Perfect. Here are some more on page 97. These come from WIDA. It's these big sections called INEA. It's inform, narrate, explain, and argue. You can take a screenshot if you need. These are all the small little other words that branch out from the big one, like inform, narrate, explain, and argue. Okay. Here, what we do is once we have our clear exit ticket for that day, we then produce a model response as if we were that grade. And so here's mine for grade 6. A structural adaptation of a hummingbird is a long beak. Because the nectar is located deep within the flower, it is difficult for large organisms to access. Since the hummingbird has a slender beak, it can fit its beak into the narrow cavity of the flower to access the nectar. Beth.
And so what we're going to do is go through the process of actually how do I look for language in the model response. So for example, Robin is the last one that popped into the chat. If you're reading hers, compare the reasons immigrants came to the United States in the past with the reasons they came or come today. And so if it's an exit ticket, the kids would only have like 5 minutes to write this. If it's the essay at the end of the unit, it's more like backwards planning to the summative assessment. So it would depend, Robin, like, was this just a quick check? Do they have a series of reasons? How would you want that written? So the next step is that you would actually write out what you would anticipate as their model response for that 5-8 minutes at the end of a class period to summarize their learning, to see if they got it. And then you're going to look at the vocab in it. What we're going to do is guide you through how we analyze that model response for a 6th grade class that was doing structural and behavioral adaptations. And the first thing is to look at the vocab. So Todd, if you move on to the slide, we're going to just play with the one on the screen because here we have everyone. And just like in the chat at the beginning, people had said tier 2 and tier 3 vocabulary words. That's a phrase that comes from Isabel Beck. And it's, again, been around for over a quarter century, those phrases. So content words, tier 3 words, that's the red. And transferable academic vocabulary are those words that could be used in other contexts in outside of this structural and behavioral adaptation. So this would be a word that kids are going to walk to other classes with and see and use. So if you would first drop in the chat those tier 3 or red content words, so we can get clarity on what we mean by tier 2 and tier 3, because that was coming up in the chat right from the beginning. So just the first thing is any content words you see, those tier 3 words. Yeah. Structural adaptation, right? Organisms, adaptation. Yay! That's it. Cavity, nectar. Yes, they're all specific to the content. The beak, the nectar, adaptation, and organism. Beautiful, beautiful, beautiful. Now, there are some wonderful tier 2 or transferable academic vocabulary. These are words that would not be used generally socially, but they are very important for our students to use academically. What are those words that you see in there, the blue transferable academic vocabulary? Go ahead. Access, yay, adaptation, located, you got it. Slender or narrow access comes up, difficult, located, you got absolutely. All of these, and you see access and adaptation maybe, but access coming up over and over and over, excellent. So Tom, that sets us up for what's happening now.
Before we teach students the word access for that day, we know in my model response and our model response, we want students to say access because that shows them they understand the hummingbird's structural adaptation. So I have to plan backwards. How do I get students to understand the word access? We start with teaching them a social context using a prompt. And here's mine. This is my actual puppy. He's over here in the corner. His name is Jumpa. He's a rescue, but more like he has rescued me. So my question for my class is, as a puppy, explain why I should not give Jumpa unrestricted access around the house. Start your sentence with the word if. For example, here's mine. If you leave Jumpa outside as unrestricted around the house, he can have access to legs of furniture like he did. And when I came home, because of his unrestricted access, he chewed it up. And now I am $600 in the hole. There goes my deposit. So can you type, that's an example of what I would do. Give a social context, kids know me a little bit more, but now they can use the word access. Your turn.
So if you think about the word access, could you think of a prompt for your students that you could give them that would have them use the word access? So the word access has to be in the prompt, but also in their answer. So depending on your grade level and the level of your students, it could be a simple sentence structure, or as Tan has, it's an explain why he should not give access and starting with if. Yours can be much simpler if you're in elementary, like where do you not have access in your house? Or do you have access to all parts of the house? Or what parts of the house do you have access to? Something like that. Kaylee's got, if I gave you access to your phone, what would you do right now? I love it. That's a really good one. Should students have access to their phones in school? And so, Sherry, that's a great question that students can answer with a yes or no. So this is the flip, is that we would have that changed into a prompt with an explain why students should or should not have access to the phones in their schools. You see the flip? Because then they have to use language to answer it. So this is where Tan and I are starting with most of our questions are actually starting with one of those thinking verbs. This is great. Do you think that you should have access to your Chromebook in the summer? Why or why not? So that's another way around it, Anne, is to put that why or why not, or just simply starting with explain why you should or should not have access to your Chromebook over the summer. These are great. If you gave me access to all the food in your pantry, would you give me access? These are great. So the next feature of academic language, the next feature is that sentence structure, the grammar, the how we put the bricks, the vocabulary together to make sense. All right.
So we look at one sentence in the model response at a time. Let's look at the first one, which is our topic sentence. A structural adaptation of a hummingbird is along big full stop. The structure of that sentence is It follows a simple sentence structure, a noun, which I call N, verb is, and the rest, who, what, where, when, how. So that simple sentence structure, noun, verb, detail, is what we use to teach students to start their sentence using sentence mirroring. I know that experienced multilinguals, or I have seen in many classes, students are waiting for the sentence starters from their teachers. What if we teach students to get a strategy, to use a strategy to start their own sentences? And this is the sentence mirroring strategy. It's not new. I know some of you call it different things. If you call it something different, type it in the group chat. We just happen to call it sentence mirroring because it's visual for students. We take the words that are in the prompt and then we mirror it in our response. And the way we do it, we start with the noun, verb, and detail. Okay. I see responses. Yeah. Oh, restate. That's right. Restate the, go ahead, Beth.
No, as I'm seeing it pop in, I didn't know if you were seeing it. Restate the question. Exactly. That's very classic for the race response if you're doing race or races. Exactly. Nice.
Right. Now we move to the next sentence structure. So we look at the next sentence. Oh, because the nectar is located deep within the flower, it is difficult for the organism to access. And then this is what I notice. It's a subordinated conjunction. So this is what I tell my students. It's a subordinate conjunction can start a sentence with the word because, and when it does, it becomes a dependent clause. Our independent clause is structured by noun, verb, detail, which they already learned to create in their sentence mirroring strategy, right? And let me show you the strategy that we can identify the language. So I would say, identify what resource does a hummingbird want to access. There is that vocabulary word we just brought in. Then I say, start your sentence with because. So in my first sentence, I would say, students, start, tell me an adaptation, structural adaptation of a hummingbird. Make sure you use the sentence mirroring strategy. The next one is identify what resources does a hummingbird want to access. Start your response with the word because. Now we move to the next word, which is since. It's the same thing. It's the same concept of dependent clause, a subordinate conjunction, comma, noun, verb, detail. Since the hummingbird has a slender beak, it can fit it into the narrow cavity of the flower to access the nectar. So I would tell my students the next thing you're going to say is identify the structural adaptation of the hummingbirds to get access to this resource. Start your sentence with since. So let's go back to your exit ticket that you had before. Measure, compare, recount, describe. I would like you to do the same thing I did. I want you to think about what words can you add for students to start their sentence. I have given you some examples, such as recount. Start your sentence with after. Compare. You start your sentence with while. While a numerator has this, a denominator is that. While a whole number is this, a fraction is that. Hypothesize, if, persuade, to
So
have something, blank, blank.
we can take Kelly's. She is an EL specialist in Alabama, and she said her prompt was compare deciduous and evergreen.
Yes.
So you might have while, because that's the compare, and the students have to start while deciduous trees lose their leaves in the winter, evergreen trees keep their needles. I mean, something like that. So you're setting them up to compare by giving them the keyword while to start their sentences, if that makes sense. So on Trisha's, recount the parts of the plant and their jobs. Your recount generally indicates a sequence. And so I'm wondering on Trisha, you may even want to have like identify the parts of an animal, parts of a plant and their jobs, but you could also change the word that they're using. So I'm just looking through Kaylee's recount how Candy has changed from the beginning to the end of chapter 3 is perfect with after. It would be after Candy did blah, 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 comma, she, and then goes on. You'll notice that all of these prompts that Tan has given set students up to use a complex sentence. What we know about experienced multilinguals, the ones that have been learning in English for 5 or more years, is that this idea of complexity, this idea of starting with a dependent clause in a sentence and ending with the independent clause, that is the structure that almost all of our experienced multilinguals need to learn and use with confidence. And so that's why you see all of the ones that are on the screen for this group, this subgroup of English language learners, as being so critical. So I'm seeing those come in now, some ideas. Excellent. After Candy lost a dog, he was alone on the ranch. Thanks. Beautiful. Love it.
Perfect. Yep. Now let's move to organization. We already have the word access, which is our vocabulary word, and nectar, such as that, resources. We also have sentence structures, like we want students to describe, and for describe, it can mean starting your sentence with because. Now we have to get organization, because my model response, I noticed I have 3 sentences I want my students to write. I kind of already mentioned it, but the first one is the topic sentence. After the topic sentence, because the nectar is deep within the flower, that's talking about the resource. We don't just jump into talking about the beak. The beak is used for something, to get a resource. So we contextualize what the hummingbird wants to have access to. That's the resource. Then the sentence goes, oh, so because it wants to have access to nectar, what structure adaptation does it have? It has a beak. So this is the structure that I noticed in my organization, the sequence of ideas I want my students to be able to follow. Start off with the topic sentence. Identify one structural adaptation of a hummingbird. Tell me the resource the hummingbird wants. Then tell me the structural adaptation it uses to get to that resource.
Tan,
Instead
if
of saying, yes, Beth.
I can share very quickly. This is one structure that Tan noticed that he expected. So when he wrote his response, his model response, he said, oh, this is a structure I can teach. I have to say that I have had this same prompt from elementary teachers. It was from a 3rd and 4th grade, and it looked very different. Their expectation for their organization was very different than this, but it was at 3rd and 4th grade level. So that's why we always have to start with that model response and then analyze it from that language lens. What are my key vocabulary words? What are my sentence structures in there? And how do those sentences fit so that I have a structure that I can teach at the organization level that students then can transfer to other places? So the 3rd and 4th grade looked very different than this.
Right. And to add on to what Beth said, people always ask when I share the model response, teachers often ask, do you give the model response to students so they can copy? I don't. We get the model response. I produce a model response so that I, as a teacher, can analyze what am I going to teach, meaning what's the content, then what's the sequence of the ideas, then how do we use the language to help students sequence their ideas? And that's it.
There's a brilliant comment in the chat that I'm just
Yes.
going to read out for everybody. It's from Guzman, who says, having the exit ticket exemplar will be a non-negotiable for our teachers in order to see this strategy through.
Yes,
And
absolutely.
yes, it doesn't take as long as it's taking us once you get used to it, but it is a fabulous way to help us understand what's the language embedded in this lesson that I'm not aware of. It's also a wonderful way to get 2 teachers to work together, because if the content or grade level teacher hands me as the ESL specialist or EAL specialist or ELD specialist or ESOL specialist, whatever our language is, if they hand that exit ticket to me, then I know the language that I'm going to have to teach.
So how do we teach the organization? I actually tell my students this. Look at the structure of my instructions. I don't just say, describe one structural adaptation of hummingbird, go right. I actually provide, for some students, they would get this. But for some other students, they would get this sequence of instructions. First, use the sentence mirroring strategy to write a noun verb detail sentence. After that, identify what resource does a hummingbird want to access, start your sentence with because, and then once you've finished that, then identify the structural adaptation that the hummingbirds have to access to get this resource. Start your sentence with since. You already kind of saw this already, but really I'm structuring out my expectation for the flow of ideas. Start your sentence with topic sentence. What does that mean? Restate the prompt using sentence mirroring. Then tell me what a hummingbird wants to access. Start with because. Then tell me how does it access that? Start with the word since. Right? Do you want to read Dana's example?
Yeah,
Response?
Dana has in the chat this. You're absolutely right. I love this. She says, I love the idea of having teachers annotate their exemplar in this way. So it highlights the key transferable language they want students to use in their responses. And Dana, after they've highlighted that, then they can do what Tan has done. Notice that he doesn't have a sentence frame or a paragraph frame. It is now telling students, these are the sentence structures. You know how to do this because I've taught it explicitly throughout the classes. And now you know how to write a 3-sentence response to describe the structural adaptation. This is what I expect. The topic sentence, the resource, and the adaptation to get to that resource. And you can do that for any animal they're studying, right? It doesn't have to just always be the hummingbird if they're doing other animals. So excellent analysis on that, Dana. Thank you.
Right.
So when you write your exit ticket, and our exit ticket was this, I can structure academic output, speaking and writing for experienced multilinguals. We suggest adding a language element to your exit ticket. So the original exit ticket that we had, our like goal for this webinar was to structure academic output for experienced multilinguals. That's where it stopped. But if we add this part in green by planning for our language development, we're adding the language element. So for example, for the compare and contrast the deciduous and evergreen trees that we have in the chat, by using while, right? So you're adding that language expectation right into your objective or your exit ticket. So we're going to ask you to identify a strategy you can use for one of the features of academic language in your exit ticket. And so Tan, explain this, start your sentence with when, so I'm clear on what you
Sure,
expect.
no worries. Please tell us what strategy that you have learned that you can implement right away to help multilinguals produce output that's academic. Please start your sentence with when. For example, when I want my students to process content, I can, comma, teach them the sentence mirroring strategy that has the content-specific words in. Okay? So why don't you type in the group chat, starting with when. Think about when first. The first part of when is, what do you want your students to do? Then comma after that is, what is the strategy you've learned in this webinar, very quick webinar, that you can use to meet that objective? No worries. This is the awkward 20 seconds of silence.
So we're modeling what Tan does with the students at the end of a class. It's like, when I want them to use tier 2 vocabulary, I can, when I want this, then thanks, Tan, for clarifying. I'm like, how would I start that?
And notice, by the way, as you're typing in your responses, I just want to let you know that all structures that you put in, we actually have to teach the structure of when, less noun verb detail. Because if not, students are just going to put very interesting responses that are not grammatically correct. So I actually teach students, start your sentence with the word when. Here's my example of when. So when Jumpa was left alone, comma, he had access to the furniture and he started to chomp it up. Right? That's an example. All right, waiting for your responses. As you type your responses, I would also want to share why we don't give sentence starters to experienced multilinguals. Newcomers, yes. give them sentence starters because they are developing language. But for experienced multilinguals, they sentence starters can often be a barrier to their academic language development because they become dependent upon us to give them the sentence starters, and they just start filling in blanks. But when we teach them to start with specific words in their own sentence, like the word when, ooh, they start thinking about the connections between ideas. Okay, Beth, here are the
We have
responses.
some really nice ones. Kira, when I'm helping students with measuring area and perimeter, I can encourage them to use the content words in their responses as well as the
Yes.
mathematical formulas. So Megan or Kira, what you've just done with that is added language to a math task that could have been silent. You're now expecting language to come into math. That's brilliant. Megan says, when I want students to use tier 2 vocabulary, I can ask them to think about those words in a situation that makes sense in a setting outside of the classroom. That's that social context. Very nice. Anne talks, when I work with teachers of experienced multilinguals, I can explain that teaching them how to navigate their responses by using directions will support their growth much better than sentence starters. Now, as Tan said, you still have to teach how to answer with when, right? But once that has been taught, then we stop the sentence frame. It's gone because they know how now. When a teacher models their logical thinking and provides the key vocabulary, students are better able to follow. When I want students to speak, I give them topics that interest them. These are great. When I want teachers to use exit tickets, I'll model the structure I learned today. These are super. Thank you so much. When students compare topics, I will provide an exemplar and provide graphic organizers and possibly a word bank. These are wonderful. When I want them to write in a structured way with academic vocabulary, I can give them specific guidelines on how to respond and structure their sentences. Thank you. Thank you for taking the time to create that complex sentence as our exit ticket for this 30 minutes. When I want students to use evidence from text, I can model it for them beforehand. Yay.
I just wanted to have you notice, like, look at the sentence variety that you created just with the single word when. This is how we actually teach sentence variety in context of what we're doing, right? And now we're not doing worksheets and where students are trying to have sentence variety. It's actually embedded in this. And we look at the writing that you produce, right? And look at how structured it is. Instead of just saying, I know that some students respond with just like because blank, 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 right? But now that we've given them the structure of when, their responses become more substantial because they're really connecting ideas together with the when structure. And I just wanted to point that out. That's why I was listening to your responses, and I was like, yes.
Well, we have come to the end, and we would love to let you know that there is a 15-hour book study course. It is asynchronous, which means you can do it on your own time and your own pace. And Kelly Ryder, thanks to her, she is hosting this course at English Learner Portal. You get a book with the course, and you'll get lots more like this. Tan and I do the videos. We take you through the book. It's more than just reading the book and answering questions. You have lots of options for how to respond. We've got a Padlet with all kinds of support from other people on that as well. What we just did is kind of a mini dive into chapter 4 of lesson planning. So you can imagine that there's a lot of other strategies that come up throughout the course. And we'd love to see you there. Both Tan and I individually and personally respond to every message that comes through on that. Somebody's saying the code isn't working. It's on Kelly Ryder's portal. Tan, if you are able to fast get that link to the course, that would be awesome. And we can drop that in the chat. And for those of you thinking I'm ordering Tan around, it's just because I am not allowed to use my right shoulder at all. I had rotator cuff surgery. So for me to do it, that's why you only saw my left hand waving at you. So it just takes a moment. So Tan's super fast on these things. We're going to drop in the chat. Oh, it looks like that page doesn't exist. That is a Kelly Ryder. When you get the replay, the video, and when you get the follow-up to this, Kelly will have the correct link in her email. So sorry that that's not working for you. It looks like it's a Kelly, it looks like an English Learner Portal issue right now. But here's the fun news. We have a lucky winner. And this is the totally not random. I'm just going to scroll and look for a name that came up from somebody that's been prompting. I'm scrolling up and down. And look, it's Kira. So Kira, if you would please, Kira Williams, if you would send me, and Ton, if you put the link up, I have my email on there. And if you just email me your address, I will send you a book. So I'm typing left
And
hand.
I just typed in the group chat the link to the course.
Thank you, Tom. It came up
Yep,
that way then. Good.
yep.
Excellent. So we have that winner, Kira Williams. If you go ahead at ellbeth@bethskelton.com, send me your mailing address and I will send it off. Kira, you're in the US, is that right? Just to make sure. Otherwise, we'll get you a digital version of the book, an electronic version. Where do you send the mailing address? It's Kira's the winner, and Kira's sending it to my email address that's in the link. Ton, if you go ahead and put that last slide up with the winner right there, ellbeth@bethskelton.com. Thanks, Kira. No, no worries, Kelly. Thank you, everybody. We so appreciate your time, your enthusiasm, your participation in the chat. Webinars are not always like the most interactive, but you made it so, and we appreciate it. Sorry about the QR code. And Tan, thanks for putting English on our portal there for if you want to join us with the asynchronous book study this summer. We would love to learn more about you and your work and support you this summer that way. Thanks, everybody. Have a wonderful rest of your day or evening, morning, wherever you are in the world. Take
And
care.
year.
Hi,
Bye, everybody.
Sonia. Good to see you. We have two from Portugal here today.
Okay.
Hey,
Bye, everybody.
bye. Good to see everybody.
Good
Thank
night, everybody.
you.
Bye.